Hello, it's good to be with you this Sunday afternoon and give to you a summary of what we looked at in church this morning. It was great to be back in our building now that the government have allowed us to worship again publicly. Nice to be back in the warmth of the building after the coldness of the last 2 weeks outside in the car park. We continued on with our series or studies in Joseph, and this week we'll bring we'll stop this study for a week to look at some Christmassy themed messages next week. But we're coming now to Genesis 45 in the life of Joseph. And really we're coming to, in many ways, a climax of the events that we've been looking at over the past few weeks and months. Joseph has not yet revealed himself to his brothers, but that's all about to change in this chapter. And in Genesis 45, Joseph, who is now exalted, Joseph, who is now the sovereign on the throne, Joseph, who is at the right hand of Pharaoh, he states in verse 3 to his brothers after weeping profusely in verse 2. Verse 3, we read that Joseph said to his brethren, I am Joseph. I am Joseph. And that's the theme for today. I am Joseph. I heard the story about a young lad who went swimming. He went swimming off the shore in Liverpool. And as he was swimming, he took obviously his clothes and his belongings off and left them at the shore. And he went swimming. But sadly, he was caught by a very, very strong tide, a strong current, and he was brought out to sea. Now, as he was brought out to sea, he was actually picked up by a ship that had left the docks of Liverpool and was on its way to Dublin. So that young lad, he was rescued, and he was brought, as I've said, from Liverpool to Dublin by that ship. But this was unknown to his family, because the night that he went swimming and obviously was taken out to shore, his clothes and his belongings and his ID card and so on were left on the shore, and they were picked up by a man. This man, as he picked up the young lad's clothes and as he looked at the ID and so on, he just assumed that whoever had been swimming in the shore had been taken out to sea and sadly had passed away. And so after taking the ID card, he informed this young lad's parents, and the parents just assumed that the young lad had passed away. And after a few days, they just assumed that obviously his body couldn't be found. It was out in sea somewhere. And they began to plan then his funeral, his memorial service. On the morning of his memorial service, that young lad, who of course had been picked up and was in Dublin, then travelled back to Liverpool. And on the morning of his planned funeral, he knocked his front door. And his mum answered. Of course, his mum was grieving, full of tears and so on. And she saw her young boy. And the true story, it tells us that as soon as she saw her young lad, who she thought was dead but was now alive, she fainted. She had lived those days, those weeks, believing her son was dead, when all the while he was alive. And that story kind of sums up where we are in Genesis 45. Because here are the brothers, and they have been in Egypt now for a second time, sent there by the father Jacob. And of course they believe that Joseph is dead. They have spent 20, 21, 22 years believing that their brother, who they sold to the hands of Egyptian slave traders, that he was dead. But he was not dead. As we have seen in these studies, he is very much alive and well. No, Joseph, he had gone from a state of humiliation, from the pit, and then to the prison in Genesis chapter 40. He had gone from that state to a state of exaltation. Pharaoh, as we have seen, in one instantaneous act, he brought him from that state of humiliation and he placed him at his right hand. Joseph became the exalted Saviour. Joseph became Zaphnath Paneah, the Saviour of the world. Joseph became the man at the right hand of the sovereign. And in this chapter, as I've said, Joseph, the exalted rescuer of Egypt, what does he do? He reveals himself to his brothers. And he states in verse 3, I am Joseph. I am Joseph. And I believe in this picture, in the incidents here of Genesis 45, we have wonderful depiction, we have wonderful foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. Of course, Jesus Christ was humiliated. His humiliation involved him taking upon himself the form of a man. We remember that at this time of year, the fact that he came into the world, but of course he then died on the cross and was exalted into heaven. He ascended into heaven. Now he is seated at the right hand of the Father. And he reveals himself to his people. He reveals himself to you and I. How does he reveal himself? As the I am. I am the bread of life. I am the water of life. I am the resurrection and the life. And we could go on and on and on. And child of God, in these difficult days, what is it that you need to see? What is it that you need to have revealed to you, unveiled before your very eyes? You need to have the I am before you. You need to have him manifest himself afresh to you, reveal himself to you. You need to see, my friend, in these incidents, you need to see a greater than Joseph, the one who says I am, the one who's in control of all things, the one who is sustaining this world, as Joseph was sustaining the then known world through giving it corn and so on, the one who was controlling the then known world. So Jesus Christ is the I am. And as John chapter 1 tells us, by him all things were created, and all things are kept, and all things are sustained. My way of one who is in control. So just one for a few moments today to look at this statement and learn some lessons from Jesus about Jesus Christ under this statement and in these verses, I am Joseph. First thing I think we see here is Joseph, as he reveals himself to his brothers, is Joseph and his discretion. Joseph and his discretion. Verses 1 and 2, we read of that. We read that Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him. He cried, cause every man to go out from me. And there stood no man with him while Joseph made himself known to his brethren. So Joseph does something very interesting here. Picture the scene. All of the brothers are gathered together in his house, and he obviously has stewards and probably individuals, officials, Egyptian officials. They're all there and they're all having this meal. But Joseph, prior to revealing himself to his brothers, revealing his identity, revealing the fact that I am Joseph, what does he do? In verse 1 we read of him causing every man to go out. In other words, he asked all the Egyptians to leave. This was going to be a very, very intimate moment between Joseph and his brothers. His brothers, remember, were full of shame. They were full of remorse, full of feelings of guilt for perhaps what they had done to their brother. We have seen that in previous studies. We don't need to go over that old ground. And Joseph is now going to deal with that guilt. He is going to deal with that marred relationship between himself and his brothers. He's going to show them that he was not dead, but rather he was very much alive. And before he reveals himself to his brothers then, he uses great discretion. He asks the Egyptians to leave. He's going to deal with his brothers, and so he just wants it to be him and his brothers as he deals with them. Child of God, this is how Christ reveals himself to you. He does it in a very discreet and in a very personal and personable and intimate manner. This is how God deals with you. Let us not forget that who does Christ reveal himself to? He reveals himself to his own. He reveals himself to his people. Oh, he may speak in a general sense to the world, but when he reveals himself, either in the call to salvation or in whatever aspect of Christian living, when God speaks to you, he does it in a very discreet and individual manner. He as it were, he causes all other things to leave, and it's just you and him. Child of God, I trust that you see, and you've even felt this in your own experience. There have been times in your life, and perhaps God is even doing this right now, and Christ has come and he's revealed himself to you, and it's as if it's just you and him. God does this. God speaks generally to the world, and he's doing this, as I've said, through this pandemic. And yet he does this, he takes this pandemic in a general sense, and he speaks to the world, but he speaks to you as an individual, doesn't he? He's revealing himself to you today, and he is applying these thoughts and even applying these words to your heart where you're at, where you are. There's wonderful condescension here, isn't there? Here we're being shown that God, he condescends. He speaks to us where we're at. He knows your circumstances. He knows what you're going through. He knows perhaps the times of past failures. Perhaps he knows even the past guilt that you still harbour, that you still feel, that's holding you back. And he causes, as it were, others to leave. And whenever he speaks to you, it's just you and him. He does this. We see this throughout the Bible. We think of Elijah there in 1 Kings chapter 19. We read of him hearing and seeing those wonderful sensations, the earthquake and so on, and the mountains shaking. Yet how did God speak to Elijah? In the still small voice. The still small voice. You think of Jacob in Genesis 32. We read there of Jacob being alone. His family were away, and there he is up on Mount Peniel. We read that there God wrestled with Jacob till the breaking of the day. God had to do a work in Jacob's life. And so there is Christ, and he comes and he deals with Jacob in that personal and individual manner, in a way that he couldn't deal with him when he was with his family. God got alone with Jacob, and Jacob got alone with God. And God spoke to him in a very discreet and personal manner. Martin Luther said that God doesn't deal with crowds, just single souls. And I trust that you feel that, and I trust that you have even felt that in this pandemic. There are circumstances that have fallen out in your life that perhaps you look around and they haven't happened to others. Perhaps other individuals, they are getting on okay with this pandemic, but it has really hit you badly. It has caused you to stop, to think. It has greatly altered your personal circumstances. Yes, God speaks in a general way, but he speaks to you in an individual way. Whatever he's doing in your life, child of God, don't ignore it, because it's God speaking to you. So Joseph and his discretion. I want you also to see here, Joseph and his perspective. Joseph and his perspective. Verses 5 and also verse 7, we read, "Now therefore be not grieved nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither, for God did send me before you to preserve life." Also verse 7, "God sent me before you to preserve you a prosperity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance." Think about what these brothers had done to Joseph 20 years previously. They had conspired to kill him. They had then thrown him in a pit, and eventually they sold him. They sold their own brother, their own kith and kin. And they then lied about all of this to their father Jacob. Remember how they took the coat of many colours, dipped it in blood, said, "Look, Joseph must be dead." And remember then all of the events that we have seen that happened to Joseph, the being thrown into prison for things that he didn't do, because he was faithful, he didn't lie with Potiphar's wife. All of the incidents, being kept in prison, even when the butler broke his promise to Joseph. All of these things, and you could have forgiven Joseph for blaming his brothers, and yet Joseph has this perspective that it was all part of the sovereign plan, purpose, and prerogative of God. See how he puts it here? Verse 5, "God did send me before you to preserve life." Don't be angry with yourselves. He said it was all part of the plan of God. Those hardships that have fallen out and that I have experienced, they're all part of God's plan. Because God has taken those incidents. If they never sold Joseph, then he would never have been in Egypt, and he never would have been in that position to preserve life, as he states here in verse 5. he goes even a step further, verse 8, just to emphasize it, just to make sure that they have got the message. Verse 8, so now it was not you that sent me hither, but God, and hath made me a father to Pharaoh. It wasn't you that sent me, it was God. And so Joseph, as the sovereign, he then reveals himself to his brothers, and he states to them, yes, I am Joseph, but he states to them that all of the events that have fallen out over the last 20 years have all been part of the Father's plan, all been part of the plan of God. And beloved, I'm sure you, during this pandemic, you've perhaps questioned, has Christ really a plan in all this? Perhaps you again look at the circumstances that you're facing, the hardships that you've gone through. Perhaps you've had a Joseph life experience through these last 9 months or so. Well, Joseph is just reminding you here that there is a sovereign behind all of the hardships that we face. Do you see what he states here? It wasn't you that did it, but it was God. And beloved, it's very easy to look at man. It's very easy to try and kind of pinpoint whose fault is this and who's to blame, and you look at all that's going on in society, and you have your opinions, and politicians have their opinions. How do we deal with this? We all have our own plans and our own thoughts and our own schemes. And yet, beneath it all, God is just reminding us in verse 8 that this is not a concoction of man, but rather it is all part of God's plan for this world generally, and then all of the circumstances that brings to you individually. Child of God, you need to see God as sovereign. You need to see Christ as the I am. What did Christ say to Moses as he was worried about taking the children of Israel through Egypt and so on? Moses, I am that I am. Moses, I'm in control. Moses, as you go through the wilderness, I'll give you the grace, I'll give you the strength. Yes, it's so easy to look at circumstances and question it all. Ask, is this really part of the plan of God? Joseph, as the sovereign, is reminding you today that whilst men have their schemes and their plans, yet there is a sovereign God above and beneath it all. Think of Romans chapter 9. Now you read in verse 17 concerning Pharaoh, the pharaohs of Egypt that brought great hardship to the people of God just after these incidents that we're thinking about in the life of Joseph. And in Romans chapter 9 verse 17, God, he states concerning Pharaoh, for this cause have I raised thee up, that I might show my power in you. Why did God raise up ungodly pharaohs? Ungodly pharaohs that even brought persecution upon the people of God, and that even tried to kill the firstborn in Exodus chapter 12. For this cause have I raised you up, Pharaoh. I'm going to show my power in you. I've raised you up to bring you low. But remember, it was all part of his plan. Child of God, recognize that today. Difficult though it may be. Difficult though it may be, yes. That Joseph had this perspective, that all of these hardships, they have fallen upon me, yes, but it was all part of the plan of God. I am Joseph. Joseph and his perspective. Lastly, I want you to see Joseph and his proclamation. Verse 9, he tells then the brothers, after revealing himself as I am Joseph, he tells all of these brothers, look, verse 9, go up to my father, say to him, thus saith Joseph, God hath made me Lord of all, come down to me and tarry not. This is a wonderful thing that he tells his brothers to do. Look, I'm alive, I'm sovereign, I'm in control. I am the Zaphnath Paneah, I am the Saviour of the world. I am the one that is exalted, I'm the one that is at the right hand of Pharaoh. Go and tell Father. Go and proclaim me to Jacob, to the one who let's not forget at this stage is still grieving immensely. Now we have seen that he is in some measure dealt with his difficulties and his hardship. He let Benjamin go to Egypt the second time. But underneath it all, you know as well as I do, child of God, he still was feeling the loss of Joseph. So here is a broken man. And the brothers were charged with this commission. Go and speak of me. Go and speak of myself, who am exalted, who am the sovereign, who is the Saviour of the world. Go and tell Father. Go, and as he states in verse 13, go and tell my Father of all my glory. And in verse 26, the brothers did this. They stated, Joseph is yet alive. And child of God, what are we to do in these difficult days? In these days of pandemic, these days of hardship, yes, these days perhaps where we feel like the brothers and we don't know whether we're coming or whether we're going. Yet having seen the great I am, having seen the greater than Joseph, having seen the one who is the Saviour of the world, having him revealed to us as the sovereign, as the one who is sustaining this world, giving us himself, we're to tell the world. Let's face it, folks, this world is broken. If anything has showed us, coronavirus has showed us, it showed us that this world is broken. There are a lot of broken hearts around. And Joseph, who states I am, is saying, look, go and tell those who are broken of me. Jesus Christ is saying, look, go and tell those who are weary in their sin, look, I am exalted, I am that I am. Go and tell them of the Saviour of the world. Go and tell them of the one who is sustaining this world and revealing himself as the bread of life, the one who sustains and keeps and satisfies in everything in life. Child of God, are you doing that? Will you speak of the one who was dead, yet now states, I am alive forevermore? The one who is resurrected, the one who is the Redeemer. I am Joseph. I trust in these few simple thoughts you have had something of a glimpse of Jesus Christ, the great I am.